So hi everyone, I'm Poppy Dowell. So I'm head of 5G acceleration for our Spring Accelerator based in the West Midlands. So we're going to do a great session with our, so just if we can just go round and do some introductions, and we'll start with Antonio.
Okay, thanks Poppy. Yeah, it's Antonio Ricciardi, Innovation Partner at Digital Catapult. The mission of Digital Catapult is really to accelerate the adoption of advanced digital technologies through different activities, and such as acceleration and challenge-led programs. And I'm working primarily on designing and delivering some of those programs focusing mainly on what we call future networks technologies, so 5G and IoT.
Amazing. And Laila?
Yes, so I'm Laila Takeh. I work at Deloitte in our strategy and innovation team, been part of the Spring programme since it was started as well. What I work on day to day is helping our clients to think about emerging technology solutions in the context of business benefits that they're seeking to gain. So what I'm going to talk to you today is along that theme.
Perfect. And Julian?
Hi everyone, I'm Julian Turner. I'm the Chief Executive of Westfield Technology Group. So we've been one of the participants on the fabulous program, 5PRING program, and we've been really pushing the technology with some of our products and applications in around the West Midlands, which I think has been absolutely fabulous, and have had support from these delightful people that you see in front of you now, which we couldn't have done it without.
Perfect, thank you. So let's kick off. So we're obviously doing an event today which is all around smart cities. But what does smart cities really mean to you guys? So we start with Antonio. What is a smart city?
Yeah, really, I think smart city can be defined through three different layers, really. And I think these layers needs to be considered to work together to make a smart city. So the first one is more a technology-based layer, so which should really include ultra-high speed communication networks of connected devices and sensors. And the second layer consists more of specific applications and data analysis capabilities. So, and translating raw data into alerts or insights and actions require the right tools. And this is where the technology providers, but also startups and scale-ups come in. And the third layer is about the adoption. So adoption and usage by cities, companies, but also the public. So many applications succeed only if they are widely adopted and manage to change some of our behaviors. So those applications that that I've spoken earlier on is encourage people to transmit during off hours and to change roads and to use less energy and water and to do it different times a day. And this can really help cities to become smart. And I think what can make a city smart is really about the ability to put data and digital technology to work together to make better decisions and to improve the quality of life. So more comprehensive real-time data can give local authorities and agencies the ability to watch events as they unfold and understand how demand patterns are changing and respond quickly and with lower cost solutions.
Amazing. And Laila, so you work with loads of different clients at Deloitte and you've expressed what a smart city is to them. How do you go about it with your customers?
So one of the interesting things I find about the phrase smart city is it personifies the city. And I think that's quite an interesting way to look at what a smart city is. It's about giving the city some sense of autonomy that the technology is helping to bring about. So a number of the things that Antonio mentioned in terms of having the sensors, having the data flows, having that connected and integrated into the different actors within a city setting, and allowing rules to be written along with citizens in that rule writing process to help that city to become a thing in its own right. The other thing that we talk a lot to our clients about is how they, as commercial businesses, might fit into that landscape. There's a huge amount of opportunities for a two-way interaction between smart cities and business systems and business advantages. And I think quite often smart cities has historically been deemed to be a local authority or a regional authority domain, whereas actually as we move forward, and particularly in the green innovation space, that nexus of public and private interaction within a smart city landscape is going to be hugely powerful.
Yeah, amazing. And Julian, taking into account kind of your business, Westfield, with the pods and the cars, what does a smart city mean? And how does it enable kind of what you're already doing to become something more else?
So I use a bit of a silly acronym for this, CFI, which is Connected Fast Information. Generally, if you remember when we first had modems, we were operating at 33,000 kilobits a second and things like that. It was like trying to bleed blood out of a stone. It was horrendous. So you can imagine now, with the information that we can get, the first thing you do, if you don't know something about it, is you'll go on the internet and use a search engine and find that information at your fingertips in less than 5 seconds. So if you could imagine, you could do that with a vehicle or a pod and get information about the vehicle, its surroundings, or anything it's connected to, or anything it can see. Imagine being able to access that within milliseconds now. And that, to me, is a real big game changer about how the vehicle performs, how it interacts with everything, but also we've now changed from a reactive type of business model to a proactive type of business model. So instead of waiting for a vehicle to get a flat tire or stop because it's got a puncture or one of the sensors is dirty, we can see all of that proactively. So we can actually say, right, let's take that vehicle out of service, or it needs to get cleaned or anything. And that's now turned everything from a reactive position into a proactive, which then gives you better profitability, increased uptime of vehicles, but also live data that you can share throughout your supply chain to make your products better.
Amazing. That's really interesting. And so examples of where smart cities are being done elsewhere and where we can maybe learn from it. So maybe, Laila, do you have any examples from your work with Deloitte and your customers where smart cities are being done kind of maybe more advanced than we are doing here, or being done really well or really innovatively?
Yeah, I think one of my go-to case studies is actually Qashqai, and Jean from our wider team is going to speak to that case study later on during the course of the programme. So I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but I think hopefully what you'll see as people attend that later is they have benefited from the fact that they've made a large-scale investment in a central solution with lots of spokes. So it's multi-layered in the kind of way that Antonio talked about, but it has those spokes that can be built out in very unique and specific ways to deliver a result. Personally, I know you referenced other cities that are more advanced. I guess the cities that we know are most advanced are China and Asia Pacific based cities. There are various different reasons for that, some of which are political, some of which are where the technology is actually being sourced and delivered. But I think what's interesting about those examples is many of them are transferable to the UK, and it's a really great opportunity for us to learn and adapt those use cases. But we must always think about how they're relevant to UK society and UK infrastructure, because there are key differences that we need to take account of.
Yeah, nice. Antonio, do you have any views of examples of where it's being done well elsewhere?
Yeah, I guess I totally agree with Laila. The most advanced one are definitely in Asia and South Korea, and also China, but also Japan. But there are some best practices also here, and I think one of the city that I think is working quite well is actually in the Nordics, Helsinki, for example. They're doing a very good job. They've developed a clear strategic plan with ambitious targets to become the world's most functional city and reach carbon neutrality by 2035. So smart solutions are a key part of their strategy to achieve those goals. And for instance, there is a district, brownfield district in Helsinki, that is called Smart Kalasatama. I hope I pronounce it well. It is a vivid smart city experimental innovation platform where actually has been developed flexibly and through piloting in close cooperation with over 200 stakeholders, including residents, companies, city officials, startups, and also researchers. So Kalasatama district aims to offer a home for approximately 25,000 people and jobs for over 10,000 people. So, and currently there are already 3,000 people living in that area, where smart devices are saving about an hour of each citizen's time every single day. So they promoted this through sharing economy that is very active there. The people are sharing literally everything: cars, parking spaces, and smart locks in everything. And the first estates are already connected, for example, to the smart grid. And all of the rest of the area to be built will benefit from, obviously, the grid, and enabling smart meter, real-time smart metering, but also electric vehicles network, new storage solutions for electricity. So, and a solar power plant already also exists there in the neighbor, and the whole district is connected through the district heating and cooling grid. So there is also a smart mobility lab that hosts the testing of mobility as a service and other smart mobility solutions. So, and finally, they're working on self-driving robot buses that will soon be used for citizens in some of the major streets. So I think we've got something also in Europe that we can look at.
Yeah, that's nice. And Julian, so Westfield's vehicles are obviously kind of deployed to many different customers across the UK and wider. Are there any examples of where it's working really well in kind of a more smart cities type way?
Yes, so there are some obviously quite unique examples. So in the UK, we've got it working in the Lake District National Park. Now, I wouldn't call that a smart city, but I'd call that a real smart UNESCO World Heritage Site. And you know, it does rain there 282 days a year, I think it is. So it is quite unique in itself. But if you think about the application that you can get on a train, have a pod take you to your hotel, and then take you to a walk, they've got a huge problem. They've got 19 million people visiting them every year, and there is only a certain amount of parking, and it gets made worse when you take a car, park it in a car park, walk up a hill for 5 hours, and then walk back. So, you know, the car park is a very inefficient way of doing it in that particular instance. But then you go to South Korea, where we've got pods in Sejong City, and there again, there's some really exciting technology being deployed there, from, like you said, you know, car park information through to you know, utilizing some of the pods there for moving people around. So again, I think there are some brilliant examples of it around the world, but each one, I'd love to sit here and say they're all smart cities. They're not, and each of them is different in their own way. So, and that could be for a variety of reasons. You know, I've just come back from Saudi Arabia, again, where they've got some fabulous technology going into some of the airports for bag recognition, left luggage, car parking, charge facilities, everything, and that's going really, really well. But they're still using Euro 4 compliant diesel vehicles. So, you know, there are some real good things going on, but also there does need to be a lot of catch up in other areas. The UK, I think, I've got to be honest, I still think is leading in the legislation, the insurance, and the technology itself. It's just that we haven't deployed all of that together in one place in the UK. We are trying to do that in SML and in other places around the UK. So it is only a matter of time, I think.
Okay, so we've got a question that's come in from Simon Arnell. So Laila, you've mentioned that centralized approach in Takeh. Sorry, my pronunciation. Do you see that most smart cities opt for a centralized approach, and is that incompatible with the previous thoughts around smart cities being shared environments, not just something owned by a local authority for exchange between the public and private sectors?
Yeah, so with Qashqai, again, I don't want to steal Jean's thunder, but it's designed to be a hub and spoke model, so that it is designed to connect across different platforms with different actors and things like that. So again, I won't talk in detail, but it's a really important point that I don't truly believe that a city can reap the full benefits of being smart unless it has that connectivity planned in. And that is the harder thing than the technology, to be frank. Navigating some of the things that Julian just touched on in terms of legislation and interaction between different interests in those parties that might hold the data or might have the bit of physical real estate. But I do think that the UK is starting to get on the right track to unblock those things. And one of the things I feel very passionately is driving that is, yes, the impact that COVID's had on communities and the need to bring communities together, but equally also our big drive in the legislation around net zero that was enshrined in 2019, which is forcing whole radical rethinking of systems and actors. So I think, to come to just to summarise, Simon, you're right to pick up on it. I believe it's absolutely integral, but having something centralised doesn't mean that it can't interconnect.
Nice, okay. So, in terms of smart cities, it obviously covers a lot of different kind of sectors and areas for health and social care. You've got public services, social events, public safety, to name but a few. Those are some which are in our call, which is open for our Smart Cities Accelerator. Shameless plug. What are you finding? We'll start with Antonio. What are you finding, speaking to partners and customers, that they're most interested in or they think is going to kind of have the most impact?
Yeah, I think you mentioned our challenges, but I think it's pretty much what I've been hearing from the partners. So we know that by 2030, 60% of the global population will live in urban areas, and in every 3 people will live in cities with at least 500,000 inhabitants. So looking at it in terms of the challenges, but also in terms of the opportunities for local authorities and the whole different stakeholders involved in it. Public safety is definitely an area that is of huge interest, and especially if we are thinking about helping cities to fight crime and improve other kind of aspects related to public safety. But also there is an element related to sustainability. For example, 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions is coming from road. So as urbanization, industrialization, and consumption grow, also environmental pressures multiply. So in the applications such as building automation systems, dynamic electricity pricing, or some mobility applications could combine to cut the emission by 10 to 15%. Those sort of use cases, but also water consumption tracking, for example, which pairs advanced metering with digital feedback messages, can nudge people towards conservation and reduce consumptions that can be by 15% in cities where residential water usage is quite high. So, there is also another area that is about public services, is still quite relevant even after COVID, because improving the daily commute is still critical to quality of life. And technologies can really make daily commutes faster and less frustrating. To name just a few numbers, in the UK, with 115 hours are lost in jams per annum per driver. So it's about 15 working days. I mean, applications that is road congestion, obviously they're more effective in cities where driving is prevalent or where buses are primary mode of transition, or intelligent thinking of traffic signals has a huge potential to reduce average commutes. And cities that deploy smart mobility applications have also the potential to cut commuting times quite heavily by 15 to 20%. And then other aspects to consider is obviously better health and well-being of the citizens. So applications that help prevent, treat, and monitor chronic conditions, for example, such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease, could make a really big difference in our developed world. But also remote patient monitoring systems that have the potential to reduce the health burden in high-income cities. And there are lots of cities can really use data and analytics to identify also demographic groups with elevated risk profiles and target interventions more precisely. So, for example, there is the so-called health interventions that can send out life-saving messages about vaccination or sanitation. Yeah, I think that there is a broad spectrum of use cases that are definitely of interest, but the big areas are mainly public safety, public services, and sustainability. So to deliver a cleaner and more sustainable environment, and also better health and well-being.
Amazing. And so, Julian, Westfield kind of fits into all those three areas Antonio suggested we could do. So thinking about your vehicles and your customers, tends to be their main motivation, rather than, is it just getting people from A to B? Do they have more motivation around?
It's a combination of things, really. So if you take one example where we've reduced the travel time for a customer from 26 minutes down to 6 minutes, you can see there's a huge benefit. You've taken 20,000 bus journeys completely out of the sequence every year. You're saving 50,000 tons of carbon every year. So for certain use cases, I totally agree. It's about the commuter time as well as the savings. There's other examples that I think, such as with our autonomous road sweeper, where the system that we're operating on that with Waitrose to deliver both groceries and also sweep at the same time is going to save all sorts of time for shopping. But just in one university alone, it's going to save 90,000 miles driven around by all these diesel transit vans around. That's just one university that we did the analysis of. So I think there's huge potentials for saving, and I think everybody's now looking at everything because the world has changed. So 2 years ago you probably saw a DPD or a UPS or a FedEx van every sort of half an hour. Now you're seeing it every couple of minutes, and obviously with that brings more emissions. There's more brake dust in the air. There's more collisions because people are in a rush to deliver parcels and they're getting paid per parcel. So there's a big change in how things are operating. But I think, not just us, but companies in the UK, I think, are really rising to the challenge to address this. And if you specifically look at how many cars we import, and I think it's something like 92% of all cars we import every year from abroad, if we start manufacturing this, in the UK, just imagine the effect that's going to have on not just the industry, but also people's jobs and where this country's going in the next 5 years.
Insane. And Laila, from your experience working with, the range of customers you have at Deloitte, are there any areas which kind of people are biting your hands off to work with you over, and other areas where maybe you're kind of having to push the smart cities angle?
I think, there's been some really comprehensive answers, and some of the topics that have already been mentioned regularly come up. But when people are wanting to work with us, it's normally for a very immediate need. Yeah. And so what that then results in is things where the infrastructure is already somewhat realisable in the near term, because obviously smart cities to work require some capital outlay at a city level, particularly for businesses seeking to make use of that infrastructure. So things that our clients are asking us are often in the logistics space, because there's a lot of that technology, like Julian's business, that's already in real world use. And they're looking to try to generate productivity gains primarily because that hits the bottom line, sustainability gains also because of the long-term legacy and agendas that are now more present in businesses, but ultimately they're looking for both of those things. So last mile logistics for retailers, how can they use the assets of a smart city to do that in a smarter way so that customers are still getting a competitive service, because that always has to be one of the questions that they ask, but that is able to be delivered at a higher margin, higher productivity level, and lower negative sustainable impacts for the business that is delivering. So we're speaking to organisations a lot about those different levers and how they interplay in the city environment, and again, what is realisable in the medium term, because that's how budgets and plans and people in job roles think about the world.
Amazing. I love that you've touched on the kind of the medium term and the infrastructure as well needed, because that brings us on really nicely to what impact and what importance is there around having 5G kind of widely deployed in order to deliver a smart cities world, or what impact does 5G have? So maybe, if Laila, we start with you.
Yeah, so the thing that I find quite exciting about 5G is that ability to untether that it offers, and that unlike some of the other previous Gs that have existed and the hype that surrounded those, we've already seen it start to come into fruition. So it's much more proven that it's going to be possible. So 5G to me offers the ability to realise all the things that we've been talking to our clients about for 10 years. We've talked about smart cities for more than 10 years. We've talked about autonomous vehicles, smart traffic systems. We've talked about the Amazon Go model, which now exists. And all of that is possible because of more of the wireless connectivity that 5G and IoT connected to it brings.
Amazing. And so, Antonio, you guys at Digital Catapult are obviously really deeply into the technology side of things, and you've been working on, AI, robotics, etc. And 5G is one of the areas that you guys really look at. What impact are you kind of seeing that 5G could have on a smart city?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a 5G technology expert, but I can definitely take on that. I think for us, 5G has definitely a leading part to play in the smart cities efficiency improvements. And it's really about going back to the main capabilities and key features of 5G. And to mention the three key ones are high data rate, and 5G will provide really high throughput experience. It's up to 100 times faster than 4G. So, and this can cater to densely populated cities, urban areas, and will enable use cases such as city surveillance, artificial intelligence, mixed reality and augmented reality, but also drone-based applications in our smart cities. The second element is really the real-time response. So the extreme low latency and ultra reliable connectivity of 5G will provide users the ability to perform remote operations. And this will enhance the ability of factory automation or warehouses automation, as Laila was saying, into the logistics sector, or enables safer autonomous driving, or doctors also in the healthcare system can perform remote surgeries. So a whole bunch of different use cases that can be enabled by this particular key feature. And the third one is the very high density of devices and connections. So 5G enables what we call a massive number of low-cost, seamlessly connected, low-energy devices, like the Internet of Things, really, and to share those data as they're deployed to our 5G network. And I think, to summarize, I don't think it's just about 5G. 5G will play a key role, but it's the combination of 5G with IoT and cloud and AI that will be needed to make really smart cities more efficient.
Amazing. And so Julian, you've been through our Spring Accelerator and you've been working on 5G use case for Westfield cars. So it'll be interesting to know kind of one, the use case that you worked on and the impact that you guys think that 5G is going to have to Westfields.
Yeah, well, it's not a theory anymore. When we obviously first got involved in autonomous vehicles, yeah, and the technology, we were seeing latency of sort of 4 to 5 seconds. When we first trialed 5G at the Royal Welsh Show, I think it's nearly like 2.5 years ago, that went down to 2 to 3 seconds, and we could upload a digital HD map in under 5 seconds, which I was gobsmacked about. It was fabulous. Obviously, we've been through the program, but we're now seeing latency in milliseconds, and we're now starting to see data transferred in less than a second. And I think that's the big difference, that there's no theory behind that, is actual practical application over the last 3 to 4 years, which I think is very important. But it can totally transform an industry, or even a specific piece of technology. Even things for the AI that we're using on the vehicles, we can be detecting something and go, look, somebody's left a bag here, let's report that straight through. And they can be within seconds know that they've got to go and do something about it, rather than waiting for half an hour for the data to upload or connect back in at base and connect to the Wi-Fi and things like that. So it's made a huge difference, and those are true facts and figures that we've seen on the vehicle over the last 3 to 4 years. So it's been a really good program, and also a fantastic view of the technology as it's been developed.
Amazing. And so you mentioned earlier as well that you still think the UK is kind of ahead in terms of legislation and other things. What kind of challenges or blockers do we have still to get over in terms of kind of realising this smart cities vision?
You do ask me the most difficult questions, don't you? Just being very clear about this. There is a lot of technology that's coming forward. The problem that we have is the legislation is totally out of date. Some of it going back to the 1900s. So if you said to me, how could you sell 1,000 pods? The answer is, get this registered for certain applications on the road, or in areas where it can be deployed as a controlled environment. Whether that you close a city, close a village down, or close some of the roads down so that these vehicles can operate. Now, when we're talking about that, it seems very simple. Just close the road, just register the vehicle. It's not quite as easy as that, as you can imagine. But what we do need to recognise is there's going to be new types of mobility coming forward, both for people, for logistics, for everything. And we need to gear up our legislation to be able to react to this in a much faster way, not wait 5 years or 3 years for there to be a new type of vehicle legislation that we have to then go through type approval and test it and do this and do that. We need to be a lot slicker and agile about applying all these different technologies that are coming forward.
Amazing. And Laila, do you have any kind of additions or other thoughts on challenges that we're facing?
I guess, again, just bringing the business lens, building on what Julian said, a lot of businesses are struggling to know when to start, because 5G coverage across the UK is in the teens, like 15% of what in the West Midlands, which is the highest because we're invested as a Spring entity in that space. And so businesses are trying to work out, do I have a private network? Is it worth me waiting and just expecting the commercial public coverage to come on board? At what point do I get in the game of shifting technologies versus waiting for some of the rest of the market to take the R&D expense and risk that sometimes comes with emergent technologies? So those are some of the barriers I think we see in getting our customers to invest time in it, which then has a knock-on effect. You have to look for more innovative companies that can see they can gain a competitive advantage by being there sooner and working with businesses like Julian's and the rest of the cohort to create the spec that's going to work now and work for the longer term.
Amazing. And Antonio, I guess, do you have anything to add from the viewpoint of kind of working with multiple startups? Is there something that they often say to you, this is kind of really blocking us in kind of deploying wider in a smart cities environment?
Yeah, I think it has been already covered quite extensively, but I think one thing that I'm ahead is really having some barriers or lack of skills, I would say, technical capacity from the local authorities as well, to ensure timely and cost-effective also implementation and operations in place. So and there are, so I guess adequate investment in building and maintaining sound physical infrastructure still matters. I think that the infrastructure and legacy city infrastructure needs to be revised and reviewed as we review the smart city strategy. And I think the weak areas needs to be considered and needs to be determined since the existing of those of the smart city strategies and the integration of also formally is isolated legacy system to achieve citywide efficiency can be a significant challenge. I think so. Retrofitting those existing legacy system is definitely a barrier to overcome, but it's part of what Laila and also Julian was saying. So about policy and trying to make sure that that all the stakeholders involved are working towards the same goal.
Nice. We've got a good question here from Joey from Curveblock. So when you have an organisation like Digital Catapult that are an arm of the government, is there a future that you could envision where the government relies more heavily on experts from organisations like yourselves to move legislation forward? Currently, we're stopped because the government politicians don't necessarily have the knowledge or skill to move these initiatives forward.
That's a great question. I would say an arm of the government. I wouldn't say that Digital Catapult is an arm of the government. We got some funding from the government, and so we run some activities that are aligned to the strategic plan of UKRI and the whole government. But I think, yeah, it's definitely a fair point. I think there should be some sort of skills also in the government to say what is needed and what needs to be done, especially on the infrastructure layer that we were talking about at the technological side. And hopefully we can see those transformations. I can say if this is going to happen or not, to be honest. But I think that is a good point, and we will definitely somehow have discussions about this.
Nice. Julian, maybe that's a question for you as well, because I know the automotive sector is quite collaborative, and government does kind of look to some of their partners in automotive to help them with their kind of plans in future. So do you think that they will lean more heavily on certain partners or industry or partners they've invested in to help them?
You give me the worst questions on this, I tell you. So there is a group called the SMMT. So that's where a lot of the large OEMs, being the large car companies, that is, come together to form a group to provide information and advice to government. The problem I have with that is it doesn't take account of any of the future mobility technology. Now the SMMT are starting to move towards that, which is fabulous, but we're missing a huge gap of all these upcoming startups, SMEs, other vehicle or even mobility providers that are just, and unfortunately hitting their heads against the wall because they didn't know about the legislation, or they've created this fantastic product and they can't use it because the legislation won't allow it. So there's a big gap, I have to be honest, and it's not being filled very well at the moment. And that's where I think people like the catapults can come in and really say to government, look, we need to create a new way of working with this type of technology that's coming through, because it's only going to be more common in the future.
Yeah, perfect. And that leads me on really nicely actually to my next question, which is around kind of collaboration and how important is collaboration kind of to realize this vision? So Laila, maybe we'll go to you.
So very is the short version of the answer. Just reflecting on what Julian and Antonio said reminded me of a piece of work that I did with the digital policing portfolio, where we looked at the first ever national digital policing strategy. And the reason it reminded me is it came up with lots of the similar kind of barriers and issues that are forcing legislators to be so sluggish. Privacy, trust, legitimacy, and citizens being part of the problem as well as part of the solution. So we have very tech savvy people on this call in the audience as well, I'm sure, but there is a large swathe of the population that's still to be convinced on where technology plays a role in their lives, and government is being very conservative as a consequence. You stack that on top of the legislators who are used to lots of different old school ways of working, and there is a lot of legislation out there. As Julian said earlier, there's legislation going back a very long time that we're still using, but it kind of pilot to the moon and back. And so changing all of these things just takes time. I think the one public success story that has come out of all of the madness and the horribleness of COVID is the ability for government to know it can now do that faster, rapid change of service and setup and policy. So I'm quite hopeful that we've learned a lot and we'll carry some of those lessons forward to the benefit of these types of topics.
Yeah, nice. And Antonio, if we think about it from kind of a startup point of view, how important is it for startups and new innovation to help kind of push this vision forward?
Yeah, I think from the startup perspective is definitely quite important, but it's also important to recognize that startups are part of an ecosystem, right? Especially in smart cities. So, and collaboration, I think, is definitely a key aspect to be considered, and and it's not just about putting business first, but it's also about putting the people, the real needs of the people, of community that needs to be addressed. I think having more actors involved is definitely something positive, because as I was saying, one of the 3 layers is adoption. So in order to increase the adoption, we need to have more stakeholders, and the company needs to recognize that there are different stakeholders involved, and they need to have clear messages and tailored messages for each one of the stakeholders they engage with. And this is something that sometimes has been not taken too much seriously from the startups. I think startups needs to really understand the audience, and they really needs to understand what the different stakeholders are looking at, in order to get the most out of each one of them. But yeah, the private sector innovation, also the public-private partnerships in this case are also very important as well. And the startups, I think that they need just to I think they need to understand better the whole ecosystem, and to position themselves in a way that is unique, and tap into the smart city strategy and roadmap.
Nice. Okay. Okay, we'll go back to Laila for this question, I think. What aspects of 5G will have the most impact on improving our cities and the quality of our lives? Question from Hector in the chat.
Oh, it's a very good question. I guess the close to real-time nature that 5G can bring, and the increase of the data within that. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, and others have on the call, data, really, the exchange of data in more of a real-time way is what's going to unlock benefits. We've felt for a long time there's lots of ideas around public health, public safety, the kind of well-being environment of cities, but unless you can monitor it and react to it in more of a real-time way, it's slightly useless. Because particularly in the UK, the weather's so changeable, and the kind of traffic's so changeable, and the people traffic's so changeable, that unless you can do something about it pretty immediately, the moment may have passed. So that real time and volume of data to be able to react more in the moment.
That's okay. And Julian, I'll ask you this one from Isabel. So we've obviously spoken a lot about legislative barriers, but what have you found? Sorry, another challenging one. The other challenges might be in terms of just getting the market to adopt some of the solutions around smart cities and specifically for your Westfield.
Ooh, crikey. Well, just I think the biggest challenge has actually been about education. Because you wouldn't believe, I could give you £1 for every person who said, oh, can we just put that in here, and can that pod run there? And it's like, it's not quite as simple as that. You need to think about connectivity. It's like, well, I've got it on my mobile phone, of course it's got connectivity. It's like, no, how good is that connectivity? How good is your upstream and downstream connectivity all the way through? And so I think there's a lot of learning for everybody, whether that's councils, authorities, but I think 5G is certainly bringing a lot of things together to help accelerate that learning, and I think both as a startup and an SME and even a large co, getting people together to share that information accelerates that learning so much quicker. Even just being on the program ourselves, we've learned about all sorts of stuff in other industries, but that's actually helped us engage with some of those partnerships to say, actually, if you are selling, a house program, why couldn't you put pods associated with that to move everybody around the housing estate? So, there's been some big challenges, but I think it's also been really good that you can talk to people that are in the same situation so that you're all learning together, because I think if you do it by yourself, you are going to come across every problem that there is, and it's going to take you a long time. If you can share that information and talk to people about it, even if they are from other industries, your learning will be dropped in half at least. I can guarantee that. So I think it's really important that every collaborations and people share that information, and also that we really push the regulators to make things more agile, not just for one company that's doing pods, but for actually everybody else moving forward with the technology.
Amazing. So Laila, I'll ask you this question also from Isabel. So I know Antonio touched kind of on some of the things startups need to think about in terms of selling their proposition in a smart cities world, but how can startups maybe be a little bit more involved in smart cities, and what are the opportunities that you're seeing that could be there for them?
I actually think, despite, again, I'm going to bring it a little bit back to COVID and COVID recovery, because it's a big part of the operating environment for every business right now, of course. And I actually think that it's unlocked lots of new and different opportunities for small and medium enterprise, because regional governments are looking to invest in the communities and unlock local growth. And there's opportunities to get involved in that right now. West Midlands 5G is one example of an opportunity like that, but there are many around the country in lots of different topics, but you have to look out for them and be prepared to invest a bit of your own personal time in doing the programs, or applying for the funding, or navigating through and being persistent through all of the connections that you need to make to get to the right person and to move ahead. But I do think right now is a good time for SMEs.
Nice. Perfect. So Julian, Joey's got a proposition for you. They have a project in the works that could benefit from a pod. So good for you guys to chat. And I'll...
His idea.
And so this question may be to Antonio. How do you determine the readiness of startups in 5G business?
Yeah, obviously we do that throughout our 5G senior technologists, but the process for us is trying to understand if their solution, first of all, they think their development of their solution can be linked and connected through the 5G network. And so our steps are really to understand what are their what is the use cases that they want to do and develop, and then what are the kind of technical requirements that they will need in order to run some tests or to start thinking about how these solutions can be 5G enabled. And then throughout our program, we also give the startups the opportunity to test on a real 5G private network, to run some tests and see if their products actually are benefiting from the 5G network, and what are the benefits compared to, for example, other connectivity technologies like 4G or Wi-Fi and so on.
Amazing. Perfect. So that kind of brings me to the end of the questions I've got, and unless any others come in the chat, we'll end it there. So I guess we just go around, and any kind of final notes on what people should think about when it comes to a smart cities, or things they should just keep in their minds. So if we start, Julian, with you.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on Hector's comment about how do you determine the readiness of the startup. For I think the Spring project and the different consortiums that are being brought together is a perfect way to assess where you are with 5G. It really is. I couldn't speak more highly of it, because you meet some amazing people, you meet different businesses, you find that you end up chatting with them outside of the program, and that is where you find out how 5G can benefit you, the learnings from it, but most importantly, that you then find partners that you can then also liaise with to help your business, open doors for you. I mean, I think we've got more business from the Spring program than we have through our business development guys. So that tells you something. But I really thoroughly recommend it. We've been through it. We thought it was fabulous. And, yes, we are already an established SME, but I tell you what, you should always be open to learning. And I think everybody, regardless of your position in any company, should be going through it.
Amazing. And Laila?
Apologies if you can hear my neighbour's building work right now. So in terms of next steps, I think thinking about the ecosystem immediately around you that you would need to convince or work with to actually harness what a smart city benefit would mean to you as an organisation. So if you're a startup, think about, yes, the local council, but also the businesses in your specific vertical and the citizens, and work out what you need to convince them or to get them on board to be part of navigating your journey. If you're a company, the same, but thinking about the startups that might bring something that you never knew you didn't know. And I think, again, it's one of the things that I hope, Julian, you liked about Spring was that kind of some of those matchmaking. And I'm sure you will have surprised some of the larger organisations who didn't think about the potential before.
Amazing. Just before we move on to Antonio, so Hilton Chong has just put a question in. So what's your advice for startups that are interested in working with corporates in developing their 5G business? So maybe Laila, if we go to you.
So the main thing is you really need to articulate the concept in terms that they will understand and that aligns to business value for them. There's lots of pitch decks out there, and some of them are fantastic, but you can't just use the same pitch deck for every corporate. You'll need to tailor it on the basis of the corporates that you are speaking with. Equally, be really clear about those corporates that are more innovative and more open to working with organisations that are in the startup category, or solutions that are more on the leading edge. It will save you a lot of time if you go where you don't have to advocate for startup work or innovation, because otherwise you spend a lot of your time just telling them why they should bother.
Nice. And Joey says that you should apply to the spring program because obviously it's the best.
Disclaimer.
And Antonio, just final words from you?
Yeah, I mean, for businesses, startups, but also on the question that Hilton raised, is really, and what Laila was saying is really key for me. So trying to really understand your audience and really understand the needs of your audience, and try and do a lot of research, understanding really how you can tap into their innovation strategies and how you need to position yourself to describe your solution in order to let them understand that is something that is really valuable for them and is already been discussed by them and something that they need to solve anyhow. So, I mean, trying to do this, and then the second step is find the right decision makers, find the right people, and not the ones that they will need another layer or extra layer of discussions. Find the people that are actually making decisions within those companies. And we at the Spring program, we are involving those kind of people because we know that is crucial.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe Julian, if you can just touch on that question as well from the point of view of a startup who's had to do that.
Crikey, it's not been easy. It's, there's one thing developing a vehicle that's got no legislation or regulation whatsoever. There's another trying to sell it to somebody and tell them that the legislation and regulation is coming for it. So that's been the most difficult situation that we've been in. However, it's like with all these things, that don't just give up because somebody doesn't respond to an email. I think you need to keep going. It's a bit like the Rocky films. Just don't give up and keep going until you get to the right person. Because although, there's a million reasons, from spam to they were in the car and didn't read it, or it got deleted by accident, and that's why I think that, the Spring program is brilliant, because actually you'd be surprised who you can get to through two connections. And I think that's the most powerful thing, that actually we can really connect to different people all over the world. And somebody out there is interested in something. If we can sell a autonomous road sweeper that thinks for itself, I'm sure you can sell any of your products to people that are far more sensible than what we do.
Amazing. Great. So I think that is basically our time now. We're right at the point of the end. So thank you so much to the panelists, Julian, Laila, and Antonio. It's been a really great discussion, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.